Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to take a moment and thank the elite members of the channel. Thank you for your continued and dedicated support. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from those ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Disturbing Hospital Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. Or read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. The asylum changed me by someone who should have known better than to stay so long. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I believed in cold drafts, old pipes, overactive imaginations. But that was before I spent years inside the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, before the shadows started remembering my name. I worked there from 2007 until I burned out in 2021. Tour guide, ghost hunt lead, paranormal wrangler, call it what you want. That building drained people, broke them down slow, like water over stone. It's beautiful in a grotesque way. The bones of the Kirkbride building yawning across the land, festering with time, trauma, and everything left behind. Let me tell you what I saw, what I heard, what touched me. The shadow and the light. I was still in training the first time something truly off happened. We were on the first floor, the rest of the group touring upstairs. It was quiet, just me and two others. The fading light outside was casting long, warm bars through the windows onto the far wall. I stared at it blankly. Then something moved. A silhouette, a man's form, clear as if he stood there himself, passed through the light. No features, just shape, head to hip. The movement was smooth, deliberate. What the hell was that? I muttered. Then we all saw it. A hand, disembodied, slipped through the frame from the opposite side. I ran. I didn't even think. I burst into the room, looked out the window, expecting to see someone standing just below. No one. Just dusk and dead leaves. Then it hit me. The windows were over 7 feet off the ground. No one could have walked by that. Not unless they were floating. The spirit box. We used tech, of course. The spirit box was one of our go-to tools. Static, white noise, blips of radio. Some people think it's a joke. Others think it's a hotline to the dead. One night in 1987's infamous murder room, we ran a session. I had the box, noise-canceling buds, shoved deep into my ears. Static. Nothing but static. No voices. No signal, just endless shh. It went on for so long, I started to drift. Then, a voice, female, cold and deliberate. Evil. I repeated it out loud, part of the experiment. Immediately, my coworker shined her light in my eyes, panic-stricken. We have to go now. She dragged me out of there like something was coming for us. Down one hall, then the next. Only after we were safely in the center section did she tell me what had happened. While I sat there, nothing but static, she'd heard footsteps circling the room, shuffling, slow, deliberate steps. She asked aloud, "Is the person outside friendly?" Right as I answered, "Evil." The door. Another night, we decided to close all the ward doors, just to see how it felt. The air was heavy, still. As I reached for one of the doors, the knob twisted in my own hand. I was not turning it. It moved on its own. Then, it yanked forward, slamming the door shut with a force that felt personal. I stood there dumbfounded, opening and closing it again and again like a fool, trying to recreate it, trying to explain it, and I couldn't. "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" the person with me asked. I didn't answer. How could I? The cold man in the hall. We had a group of 3 guests one night with thermal gear. They were serious about documenting something real. We watched their footage live on a tablet, a small figure of heat walking the hall to place the trigger device. But as he passed the doorway, something else emerged, just briefly. A human shape, upper body only, cold blue on the thermal camera. It leaned out of the room behind him, as if peeking to see who dared walk its hallway. I still don't have that footage. I'd give anything for it. June 3rd, the burn. I'll never forget the date. June 3rd, 2017, 3:40 a.m. We've been hearing a woman's voice for hours, sometimes whispering my name, sometimes sobbing. Footsteps ran down the halls, then vanished. I sat with the group, trying to stay grounded. Then it hit me. Dizzy, nauseous. My lower back felt like it was on fire, just to the right of my spine. I ignored it, told myself I was overreacting. The pain kept climbing. Finally, I asked someone to look. They gasped. A fresh abrasion was forming, 3 to 4 inches long, raw, angry skin, like a burn. I'd mocked people before with claiming to be scratched. I don't anymore. It lasted a week. The nerves in that spot still go cold when I talk about it. June 4th, the welts. Same place, same time, because apparently I hadn't learned my lesson. I was swapping out memory cards with my recorder in one hand, flashlight in the other. Then I felt it. Sharp burning pain on the underside of my forearm. I swung the light down just in time to watch it happen. 3 welts rising on my skin like something invisible had clawed me. They vanished in 15 minutes, but I watched them appear. I watched them appear. I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm not scared. Scared doesn't fit what I feel. It's deeper, colder. Like something is always just a step behind you, waiting for you to forget it's there. After I left that place, it felt like getting out of a toxic relationship. My mind is clearer. I laugh more, sleep better. But I'll never be the same. That asylum took something from me. Maybe it left something behind too. Either way, it still whispers sometimes, especially in October. The basement. I'll never forget the night we went down into the basement. Technically, it was off limits, especially during the night tours. That part of the asylum wasn't on the usual route. It was where they performed lobotomies, electric shock therapy, and other things I'd rather not imagine in detail. Medical wing, they called it, but that's a generous term. Butcher block would be more accurate. We were nearing the end of the tour, when someone in our group asked our guide if he'd ever been down there after dark. He paused, really paused, and then said quietly, "Not if I can help it. Something down there. It doesn't want us there. It's not just creepy. It hates you. Makes your skin crawl." Then, without missing a beat, he added, "But you guys have been cool. Want to see it?" We all laughed nervously, like it was a joke, but he was already leading us toward the chain gate that separated the basement from the rest of the asylum. The second we passed through the gate, the air changed. It was damp, cold, but not like weather cold. It was deeper than that, like the place itself didn't want us breathing its air. I thought I was just imagining things, but I looked around and noticed everyone was quiet, jittery. One girl kept wringing her hands. Some guy next to me muttered, "This feels very wrong," under his breath, but followed the group anyway. Another guide had joined us, a woman, and she offered to run a spirit box session. She'd done it before, said it helped open the line of communication. She put in earbuds, connected to the spirit box, then added noise-canceling headphones on top, blindfolded herself, and sat on the dusty floor in the center of the room. We tested the setup. There was no way she could hear us. We formed a circle around her. Our guide began the questions. "Is someone here with us?" Nothing. "Can you give us a sign?" The girl's voice cut through the silence. "Up." We all exchanged glances. The answers that followed were scattered and nonsensical. "House." "No." "Eat." Just random words. It almost felt like a joke. I pulled out my phone and started recording with Snapchat, thinking maybe we'd catch something weird on playback. Then she said, clear as day, "Here." Our guide paused. "Where are you?" Without hesitation, "Door." Then, "Doorway." Every head turned. We stared at the open doorway like something might crawl through at any second. I felt someone grab my hand. Just another girl from the group, but her grip was like a vice. The guide kept asking questions, but the girl's answers lost all pattern again, until she suddenly said, "You." He blinked. "Me?" "Go." Do you want us to leave?" No answer. He tried again. "You're being really rude. You just want to..." "Fuck you." The words came out flat and sharp. Not angry, mocking. "Fuck you," she said again. Now her voice was a stream of curses, slurs, and angry venom-soaked commands. "Leave. Go. Get out." It was like something else had taken over her. The pressure in the room shifted, like 100-pound weight dropped onto my chest and shoulders. I couldn't breathe right. I looked around and I wasn't the only one. People were fidgeting, grabbing their chests, blinking like they were struggling to stay upright. The guy didn't wait for another sign. "We're done. Get her up." The girl yanked off the blindfold and headphones. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, and she looked terrified. We didn't need to be told twice. No one made a joke. No one laughed. We just left. Back upstairs, when we finally talked about it, Nearly everyone admitted they felt the weight, the pressure, like someone was pressing down on us, like we weren't welcome, like we weren't supposed to be down there. Our guide crossed his arms, voice flat. "And that," he said, "is why I don't go down there anymore." I still have the recording. I can't bring myself to listen to it again. Not yet, at least. I'm a nurse manager at a small hospital tucked away just far enough from town that the nights feel heavier somehow, quieter than they should be. During my first years there, I volunteered for the night shift. I told myself it was to get to know the staff better, but truthfully, I've always felt more comfortable in the dark. People are more honest at night, but sometimes things happen that defy honesty, things that don't belong. It was around 2:30 a.m. We'd finally settled the patients for the night, and the halls had all gone still, save for the hum of machines and the occasional muffled cough behind closed doors. That's when the phone at the nurse's station rang. It was our security officer. His voice had a strange edge, light, almost amused to it. "Hey," he said, "can you keep the little girl in check? She's been running up and down the second floor hall. I'm watching her from the atrium. She's with her parents, right?" My stomach dropped. We didn't have any children admitted that night. I scanned the census list again just to be sure. "We don't have a little girl on the floor," I said slowly. There was silence on the line, then a nervous laugh. "Come on," he said. "I just saw her. Dark hair, white nightgown. She's been running back and forth like she's playing tag. Her parents are just standing by the window." I stood up, phone still on my ear, and stepped out into the hallway. Empty. Still. Not even the echo of footsteps. "There's no one here," I said. He didn't believe me. Not until he came upstairs himself. I remember the moment he turned the corner and walked up to the nurse's station. His face went pale, drained, like something had been pulled out of him. Not fear exactly, but something deeper. Recognition. Because in that moment, he knew what he'd seen was real, and that it shouldn't have been. The other nurses backed me up. We'd seen no one. No child, no parents, just an empty hallway. He didn't argue, he just left the floor without saying another word. The next day, he switched to day shift. Within a month, he found a new job entirely. Can't say I blamed him. We never told him the rest of it. We didn't tell him about the lullabies some of the patients hear when no one's around, or about the child-sized handprints that sometimes appear on the inside of the medication room glass. We didn't mention the nurse who left mid-shift because she swore something small giggled behind her while she prepped an IV. Small things. They stay with the night shift. The boots in the ward. I've always had a thing for the spooky and unsettling. As a photographer, urban decay is like a siren song. Peeling wallpaper, rusted bed frames, shadows clinging to corners that haven't seen light in decades. So, when I got an overnight pass to shoot inside an abandoned insane asylum, I was all in. The place was open to the public for guided history tours and overnight exploration, but it had been left mostly untouched since its sudden closure. Once a Civil War care facility, the asylum had a long, rotting history of violence, overcrowding, and malpractice. At one point, it held over 3 times its intended capacity. Some of the patients weren't there mentally ill, just thrown in and forgotten. A few renovations were made for safety, patching collapsing floors, stabilizing stairs, but much of the original building was left intact. Dusty gurneys, rusting restraints, faded chalkboards still bearing faint scribbles. Even the room nameplates were preserved, many with names scratched out or half melted by time. I want to make something clear here. I never really believed in ghosts. Not in the floating white sheet sense. Anyway, I respected people's stories, sure, but I chalked most of it up to imagination. That night changed everything. Around midnight, after the guided portion, we were encouraged to explore. The building was massive, 4 floors, multiple wards, and miles of darkened halls. Everyone had on sneakers or soft-soled shoes, and the place was eerily quiet after the group dispersed. I broke off alone, drawn to one of the far wards where I heard the chalkboards were still intact. The entry was a massive steel door, heavy, old, loud as hell. You couldn't open or close it without the whole building hearing it scream. Beyond that door, the hall narrowed and curved slightly, leading to the very edge of the wing. Dead end. No other way in or out. I took my time shooting photos of the decaying cells and scribbled walls. At one point, I stepped into a small room, aiming my lens at a rust-colored stain trailing beneath a hospital bed, when I heard it. Boot steps. Clear, heavy, deliberate. The kind of sounds boots make when striking old hardwood. The acoustics in that hall made it echo with a strange clarity. Each step fell slowly, methodically, drawing closer. I froze. It wasn't the muffled shuffle of sneakers. It wasn't wind. These were boots, coming from the direction of the steel door. I didn't breathe. 7, maybe 8 footsteps. Slow, intentional. Then, nothing. Dead silence. I waited, camera still in hand, heart in my throat, then cautiously leaned into the hallway. No one. The corridor was empty, not a shadow moved. That door hadn't made a sound. Not the metallic screech it's known for. It never moved. It never closed. I waited for someone to come around the corner, maybe a guide playing a prank, but another explorer who managed to sneak in. But no one ever came. I searched the entire ward, every room, every crevice. There was no one and nowhere to hide. The sound is burned into my brain, the exact rhythm of those boots, like something patrolling a familiar path. Not hurried, not wondering, just pacing. I don't know what I heard that night, but it wasn't human. I left that ward shaking. I've seen a lot of dark places through my lens. Places where time has stopped and history seeps through the walls. But that night, I didn't just capture decay. I felt something that still walks those halls, and whatever it is, it wears boots. The morning ride. It was just after 7 a.m. The sun was crawling up over the horizon, casting that strange gray-blue light over the hospital parking lot. I just finished a brutal 12-hour night shift in the emergency department, running on caffeine and adrenaline, dead on my feet. Still, in my scrubs, hair tied back, badge clipped to my pocket. The hospital's parking garage is usually quiet around that time, peaceful even, a far cry from the chaos inside. I was halfway to my car when I heard it, a sharp whistle. Not the cat-calling kind, more like someone trying to get my attention in a hurry. I looked over and saw an older model SUV idling near the curb. The passenger side window was halfway down. A man leaned out slightly. "Hey, you work here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I hesitated. Normally I wouldn't have approached, but something about the way he looked, pale, sweaty, twitchy, made me think he might need help. And this hospital felt safe, familiar, like home after so many years working here. As I got closer, I noticed there was a woman in the driver's seat. She looked, tense. Eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel like she didn't want to be there. The man in the passenger seat lit a cigarette off the smoldering butt of another, exhaling smoke in my direction. He was jittery, his eyes bloodshot, pupils huge. He launched into a rambling monologue about his weekend. Drugs, sex, an orgy, more drugs. His words slurred slightly, but he was coherent enough for this story to be unsettling. Then I noticed the blanket, one of those old crochet Afghans draped over his lap like somebody's grandmother had packed it for him. But it barely concealed what was happening beneath. A grotesquely swollen erection, mistakable and unnatural. He shifted in the seat and winced, pacing one hand, the free one, around it like he was trying to keep it from pulsing through the fabric. "Been like this almost 20 hours, he groaned. "Started Friday night. I took some Viagra, then some Molly, then some Coke. It just wouldn't go away. Feels like it's gonna explode." My stomach turned. I took a step back. You need to go inside," I said, trying to stay professional, though my voice wavered. "Now, this isn't something you wait out. You could lose," he interrupted, his eyes darting. "Lose what?" I swallowed. "They'll need to decompress it. That means a needle into the shaft to relieve the pressure before tissue starts dying." He blinked. Then again, his mouth worked around the filter of the cigarette, like he didn't quite understand, or maybe he didn't want to. The woman still hadn't moved. She just stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched like she'd heard all of this before and was done hearing it. Then, without a word, he rolled up the window. The cigarette pressed against the glass for a second before he flicked it out. The SUV peeled away, tires screeching lightly against the curb as they turned down the ramp and disappeared into the early morning mist. I stood there for a long time, the hospital looming behind me, its light still flickering into the dawn. I don't know what happened to him, but I've seen enough cases to know the human body doesn't tolerate that kind of abuse. Tissue necrosis, Sepsis. It doesn't take long. I also know that wasn't the first time they'd parked out there. And I've never been able to shake that look in her eyes. The driver, like she wanted more help than he did. Like she wasn't just driving him around. Like maybe she wasn't free to leave. The walk to the warehouse. I worked the graveyard shift as a hospital housekeeper. People think the hospital is the creepiest place at night. Dim hallways, flickering lights, that sterile, dead silence. But they don't know about the warehouse. It sits just behind the hospital, not far, maybe a 3-minute walk. But it feels wrong, especially at night. The path leading to it is narrow, squeezed between tall brick walls and overgrown hedges. No lights, just the weak glow from the hospital exit behind me that disappears after a few steps. We keep all the extra supplies in that warehouse: linens, gloves, sanitizer. So I have to go there a lot, and every time I do, I hear them. Footsteps. Not mine. I know what mine sound like. These are heavier, slower, dragging, like someone walking with a limp, shoes scraping against the pavement. Shuff steps. Shuff step. Sometimes they match my pace. Sometimes they stop when I stop. I've turned around more times than I can count. Nothing, just darkness. But the path is narrow, and there are plenty of places to hide. Behind dumpsters, in the brush, inside that damn warehouse itself. The worst part? The phone they gave me to keep in contact with the hospital? No reception out there. None. It's a dead zone. Security doesn't patrol that area either. Too out of the way, I guess. And there are no cameras. If something ever happened to me out there, no one would ever know until morning. I used to try and shake it off, blame it on nerves, on being tired. But last week, I dropped a box of gloves out there, bent down to pick it up, and someone whispered my name. Directly behind me. I ran. I didn't even look. I just ran full speed, knowing that if I tripped or twisted an ankle, no one would find me until it was too late. Now, every time I walk that path, I feel like I'm being watched, not followed, hunted. I've started bringing an extra flashlight and a box cutter. Like that's going to help, but I have to keep going out there. That's the job. And whatever it is, it knows that. She winked at me. A night shift I'll never forget. I've worked the night shift as a nurse for a few years now. You get used to a lot. Strange hours, strange patients, and strange family members. But there's one night I still can't fully explain, and I don't really want to. Our night routine is simple. 2 nurses on duty. One sleeps after 11 p.m. while the other stays up, watching over the ward. We switch halfway through the night. I was still pretty new when this happened, maybe 6 months in. Still adjusting, still thinking I'd seen the worst people had to offer. Around 2 p.m., I was sitting alone at the nurse station. It's quiet at that time, just the occasional beeping monitor or creaking wall. Across from me were 2 patient rooms, and one of them was a woman in her 70s, admitted for a heart condition. Her daughter was staying the night with her, a tall, well-dressed woman in her early 40s. She seemed put together, maybe a little tightly wound, but I didn't think much of it. Families get weird when someone's sick. Then the air changed. It started with a soft, strange howling, like wind blowing through a tunnel. Not loud, but unnatural. I figured they cracked the window open. But then came the smell. And I swear to God, I've never smelled anything like it. I'm used to human smells. This was something else. Something wrong. It was heavy, wet, and foul, like meat that's been sitting in a sewer. It started seeping from the bottom of the door. I thought maybe the older woman had an accident and they opened the window to air it out. Still, I was on duty and other patients were starting to complain about the noise, so I went to check. When I opened that door, I froze. The daughter was completely naked, lying across her mother's chest like some twisted embrace. Her arms were outstretched, eyes open, but she didn't look at me. She was humming, low and broken, like a lullaby sung through gritted teeth. I tried to stay professional. I stepped in and said, "Ma'am, is everything all right? Do you need help?" No reaction. Then suddenly she sat up, grabbed the metal side rail from the hospital bed, which had been somehow torn loose, and lunged at me, screaming to get out. I barely dodged her, backed out of the room, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. A trail of diarrhea stretched from the bed to the bathroom, smeared, almost deliberate. Back at the station, I threw up in the sink. Couldn't help it. Then I just sat there frozen. 10 minutes. 10 minutes passed before I called my coworker. We went back together. By the time we returned, the daughter was fully dressed, sitting calmly by the window like nothing had happened. The smell was still unbearable, but her demeanor had flipped like a switch. Polite. Too polite. She said she'd just had an accident and was embarrassed, and that's why she ran at me. Her mother confirmed the same story word for word, like it had been rehearsed. But when I asked why she had been laying naked on top of her, the old woman just blinked. "I don't remember," she whispered. Her eyes were glassy. The rest of the shift blurred by. I didn't sleep, didn't talk much. Next morning, I went to get a coffee in the hospital cafeteria, and she was there. The daughter, calm, freshly dressed, holding a latte like a normal person. She caught my eye, and then she grinned. Wide. Too wide. Then winked. Something in my stomach turned. It felt like her eyes had reached into me, like she knew what I saw, or worse, that she wanted me to remember it. I told my supervisor, but I couldn't explain it right. How do you report something like that? There's no form for suspected evil. The mother had surgery and was discharged a few days later. I never saw that daughter again. I don't know what was really happening in that room. I stopped trying to figure it out. All I know is, sometimes late at night, I'll catch a faint smell in the air or hear a low humming sound from a nearby room, and I'll freeze, just for a second, waiting to see if she's back. Back in my early nursing days, I worked the night shift on an oncology floor. Nights were quieter, lonelier, and sometimes they made you notice things you wouldn't during the day. There was a patient I looked after, an older gentleman slipping into the final stages. The doctors were still running tests, still trying, but everyone with eyes could see he was fading. I took care of him every night for almost 2 weeks. He barely spoke, barely moved, except for one thing. He kept mentioning someone named Buddy. "Buddy came again tonight," he'd whisper to his wife, voice weak but sure. "He says it's almost time." Every time he said it, his wife's face crumpled like paper. She would hold his hand, crying softly, as if the words were a countdown she couldn't stop. I never asked her who Buddy was. Honestly, I assumed it was their older dog or maybe a childhood friend. Someone long gone, lingering only in his memory. Then came that night. His wife came in as usual, but this time she brought someone. An older man I hadn't seen before. He had a soft face, kind eyes, and a quiet sadness about him. Standing beside him was a woman, gray-haired, petite, with a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She didn't say a word, just stood close to the man like she belonged there. I assumed they were a couple. The man shook my hand and introduced himself. I don't remember his name. What I remember is how cold his hands felt, unnaturally so. He chatted with me briefly, and the woman stood silently behind him, watching my patient with that same eerie smile. Then the man turned to the patient and asked, "Have you seen Buddy again?" And for the first time in days, my patient's eyes lit up. He really looked at us. He was waking from a fog. "Yes," he said, clear as day. "He visits me at night. I think I'm going with him soon." The man started crying, suddenly, deeply, and moved to the bedside. The silent woman remained by the door. I moved closer to comfort him, and he pulled out his wallet with trembling fingers, showing me old photographs. 4 people smiling in the sun. Vacations, dinners, laughter. One of them was the woman who had just been in the room with us. "That's Buddy," he said, his voice breaking. "My wife. She died 3 years ago. That was her nickname." I felt my blood go still. I turned back toward the doorway, toward where she had been standing. But she was gone. Not walking down the hall, not sitting in the chair. Just gone. Like she had never been there at all. I stepped out into the hallway, half expecting to see her just outside, maybe needing a moment alone, but the corridor was empty and silent. The kind of silence that presses in on your ears. I never found her. I never saw her again. And my patient died the next night. Peacefully, they said. I still think about him sometimes, about the woman who stood by the door, smiling softly at a man she once loved, about how he spoke to her like she'd never left, and maybe, for him, she hadn't. I never told the old man what I saw, that Buddy had been there, watching him, waiting. Some people don't want to hear that kind of thing, but I've learned something since then. Just because we stop seeing someone doesn't mean they stop visiting. I work as a janitor in a hospital. Not the most glamorous job, but I've gotten used to the quiet routine of it. Most days are uneventful. Most. This happened a few years back on one of those eerily calm days. The sun was shining, the floor was quiet, too quiet, and I got a call to clean up something in a patient's room. Just a standard mess, I figured. No big deal. The floor belonged to an elderly man, probably in his late 80s. Frail, silent. His wheelchair sat unused in the corner, and he looked vacant. Like he was halfway between here and somewhere else. He didn't speak when I came in, barely even blinked. Just stared at the wall like it was whispering something to him. I gave him a polite nod and headed into the bathroom. Whatever had dried on the tile floor was sticky as hell, and my mop wasn't cutting it. I went back out to my car to grab my scraper, and that's when I noticed the large plastic basin we use for sponge baths was sitting in the sink. It hadn't been there a moment before. Weird, but I brushed it off. Maybe a nurse had left it and I just hadn't seen it, maybe. So I got on all fours and started scraping the floor. The smell was strange. Not foul, just off. Like metal and mold, and then I felt it. That heavy crawling feeling like something was behind me, watching, waiting. I froze, holding my breath, ears ringing from the silence. Then, crash. The basin from the sink flew past my head and smashed against the wall with enough force to leave a deep crack in the plaster. I flinched so hard I nearly fell over. The room was empty, just me and the old man who hadn't moved an inch. He was still staring straight ahead, lips slightly parted like he was mouthing something. No sound, just breath and emptiness. His legs were shriveled, motionless. No way he could have thrown it. The windows were sealed shut. The door was closed. There was no one else there. My blood went cold. Whatever it wasn't human. And apparently it didn't want me in that room. I finished the job faster than I ever have in my life, keeping one eye on the old man, one eye on the door. As I backed out of the room, I swear, he looked right at me and smiled. Not kindly, not grateful, but with something that felt ancient and cruel. I don't take bathroom calls in that wing anymore, and I still wonder if that man was ever really alone in that room. The crowd. This is a true account, retold. I've been a firefighter and medic for years, and this job, it changes you. Not just because of the trauma or the blood, but because sometimes you see things that simply shouldn't be. Things that no amount of training prepares you for. One of my first calls was a rookie medic, was already the stuff of nightmares. We were dispatched to a rural property outside of town. They'd said someone was in the barn, but the details were vague. When we got there, something just felt off. My partner and I circled the barn, peeking through a crack in the old wood siding before opening the door. That's when we saw it. A shotgun was rigged to the door frame, set to blow the head off whoever dared open it. And hanging from the support beam in the rafters, swaying ever so slightly, was the person who had called us. That was the first. There were others. One night, a man rolled his truck off the highway. As I walked up to his crumpled vehicle, he pointed a gun straight at my face. His eyes were vacant, like no one was home. I was fast enough that time, barely. But the one that still keeps me up? That happened in Lacey, Washington. I was still living alone in an apartment complex off a Rodell Road. The road curved sharply near my place, and it had a reputation. Accidents happen there often, especially at night. Some bad, some fatal. One night I was watching TV when the lights flickered. Then, darkness. The power snapped off like a switch had been thrown. And that's when I heard it. The unmistakable crunch of metal, distant but clear. Someone had wrecked on the curb. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed my black trench coat, laced up my boots, and ran. The wind had a strange chill, like it carried whispers. But I ignored it and kept going. As I approached the road, I saw the wreck. A car had slammed through a power pole and flipped into a patch of thin trees. Sparks rained from the broken transformer, casting flickers of pale light over the scene. But the car wasn't what made me stop. It was the crowd. Maybe 20 people stood in a tight circle around the wreck, silent, still, their backs to me, facing inward. Something was wrong, very wrong. I rammed up and shoved my way through them. None of them reacted to me, not even a flinch. At the center, lying on the forest floor, was a young woman, bloodied, gasping. Her eyes darted in terror, searching the circle. Not one of the bystanders moved to help her. I dropped to my knees beside her and took her hand. And the crowd, they all stepped back in unison. One synchronized step, like a ritual. A chill crept into my bones. Then something clicked in my brain. I remembered a story I was read as a kid. A twisted little tale from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. In that story, called The Crowd, a man crashes his car and finds himself surrounded by silent onlookers. They don't help, they just watch. And when the paramedics arrive, they vanished. That story had terrified me as a kid. And now, I was living it. I kept speaking to the girl. Stay with me. Look at me. Don't look at them. She looked into my eyes, and her trembling eased a little. Has anyone called 911? I asked. No response. Just the wind and their silence. I pulled out my phone with one hand, the other still gripping hers, and called it myself. Minutes passed. It felt like hours. When the paramedics' siren cut through the night, I felt it. The tension in the air snapped like a rubber band, and the crowd vanished. Not dispersed, not walked away, vanished. 1 second they were there, the next, gone. I passed the woman's hand to the medics, my legs like jelly as I backed away. I turned and looked around. Across the street, a couple of my neighbors stood outside, watching with confusion. No one else. No one who had been in that circle. Later, I tried to remember the ending of that old story, what happened after the crowd vanished in the book. But I couldn't recall it. And somehow, that felt like a mercy. Until the next morning, I was scrolling through local news reports about the accident when something strange caught my eye. A photo. A blurry image of the wreck. taken by a witness who'd arrived after the paramedics. There, behind the police tape and the tree line, were faces, dozens of them, watching, and one right in the center staring directly into the camera. It was me, but I was already home when the photo was taken. So who or what was that? And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true disturbing hospital stories. I'd like to take a moment and give a shout out to the other members of Back to Ashes and to the new listeners. Thank you all so much for your support. I appreciate each and every one of you. If I could hug you, I would. Thank you for keeping this channel alive. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. In the meantime, please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.